Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and before we get into our topic this week, I want to give you a little peeksy behind the curtain. I had originally recorded this episode a couple of months ago, and I had been talking to a therapist just about my brain, and my therapist, she was like, look, I don't have the credentials to give a formal diagnosis, but based on everything, all right, that I know about you so far, you are on the autism spectrum. And so that really got some wheels turning for your boy, because, that's just not something you tell everybody. All right. But, I took that information and I started doing some research and started, really digging into mental health and understanding it a lot more. And look, I have always had problems navigating social interactions. All right. I have always been extremely shy. I have always been very reserved. I don't like big social gatherings. Even when I go home for the holidays and I'm around my family, it's really difficult for me to engage. And I've known these people my entire life. If I am in unfamiliar spaces or I'm surrounded by a large group of people, I genuinely start to disassociate and I shrink inside myself, and I just everything kind of becomes a blur. Everything just kind of, I don't know, it gets real weird, and I got to get out of there. And then by the time I get home, I am just completely exhausted. One example, fairly recently, I was the best man for a wedding that may or may not have gotten called off. And we joke about this. And I had to, organize the bachelor trip. And it was with like 7 other people, 5 of them I had never met before. I'm kind of corralling all of these drunk sheep around Asheville for most of the weekend. And when I got home, I slept for, probably, over the next 48-hour period, I slept for at least 30 hours, if not more, maybe closer to 36 hours. And that's not normal. And that sort of thing really bothered me. But then I started looking at all of these mental disorders because I thought it was just anxiety. I thought it was just some social anxiety, get maybe some Xanax for it, be right as rain, moving on. But then I started seeing all of these characteristics of things that started checking off all of these boxes for autism spectrum. And I thought it was just, kind of my quirks, just me being a little weird guy. For example, I don't like being touched. All right. It's fine if my wife touches me most of the time. I don't like being hugged by people or touched by people really other than my wife. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I tend to wear very baggy clothes because I don't like the feeling of clothes touching my body. I have issues with textures, with certain types of foods. I am a very rigid person. I meticulously plan a lot of things. And yeah, it ticked off a ton of boxes. And so basically, I went and saw like a full licensed psychologist, went through several tests, did some interviews, and I am officially on the autism spectrum. Now, because of the constant mental gymnastics that I am performing that no one really sees, I really try to, when I'm talking to someone, I really try to make sure I make eye contact, even though that really makes me uncomfortable. I hate eye contact, but I try to do that. I try to nod, acknowledge that I'm listening. I try to be very aware of my tone and my inflection and my cadence because I want to make sure that I sound normal and that I don't want to come off as robotic. And I do all of those things. And at the end of the day, I am very tired. All right. And as I have gotten older, it has become more and more difficult to manage all of these things that I have been dealing with. Because I know what some of you might be thinking is like, well, you don't sound autistic. And like, that's kind of racist, bro, for starters. But also it's because I am constantly working to try to not be like that and make people potentially uncomfortable. But at the same time, now that I know, now that it's official, I feel a little bit free in a weird sort of way. Like I have this frame of reference now because now I can help people better understand me, and I can attribute the anxiety and the frustration that I feel not to the fact that I've done something wrong or that I just can't get something right, but it's just because my brain just isn't wired to properly navigate the world that most neurotypical people have constructed. And so I made a video about it on my personal social media channels. Go check it out if you weren't able to see that at the John Henson on Twitter and Instagram. Go check that out. Go watch that video. It really encapsulates I said Instagram. Instagram's like 6 days. My Facebook page. So facebook.com/John Henson Writes, and then Twitter @the John Henson. But it really kind of explains more everything that I deal with. It explains what this means moving forward, how I plan to interact with the world, what you can do to help. Spoiler alert, you don't have to do anything. It's fine. But everything's great. All right. So don't feel bad for me because you may see me doing a little bit more educating around autism. And I use that term very specifically because it's not awareness. Like, we're all aware of autism, but a lot of people are grossly misinformed about autism spectrum. And as someone who is high functioning, I feel like I am in a really good place to do some of that educating. So I may be doing some more of that in the future. I don't think it'll be on this platform necessarily, but follow me on social media and see what comes of it. Now, this week on the pod, we're talking about ships. We're talking about some strange paranormal ships. So let's try to pivot out of this bummer of an intro, I guess, and let's start the stories. Story time. Worst way to start the show ever? Probably. Didn't even talk about the topic. But we're talking about 4 ships, boats from history that just have some strange stories around them. We're talking about the Carroll A. Deering, the Orang Medan, the Utsuro Boon, and our first story of the day is about the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. And Northumberland Strait is this relatively narrow body of water that separates Nova Scotia and New Brunswick from Prince Edward Island in Canada. So like way, way up in the northeastern part of the North America, I guess, or Canada, I guess. But beginning in 1786, people began seeing a mysterious ship just floating back and forth in the waters of this strait. And unlike the regular cargo and passenger ships that were floating by, people were seeing this schooner with 3 masts and white sails that, according to witnesses, were just perpetually on fire. So obviously it's going to stand out. While sightings were recorded at all times throughout the year, most of them were reported between September and November. And there's a school bus outside right now backing up. I don't know if you can hear it on the microphone, but that's annoying. And It's distracting, and I could edit this out. But why would I? Never done much like that before. And I can't keep going. I cannot keep going in the story until this bus turns its backup beepers off. There we go. All right, and we're back. Most of these sightings for this ghost ship occurred between September and November every year. Some connected the ship to approaching storms. Others tried to make rescue attempts to try to save whoever was on board this burning ship, but by the time they got out into the strait, like the ship had just disappeared. In 1900, a group of sailors spotted the flaming ship in Charlottetown Harbor and raced out in a rowboat to save whoever was on board. But again, on the way out to reach the ship, it completely vanished. They even called divers in to search for the wreckage, but like no one ever found anything. Thanks to science, though, who is always more than happy to offer a logical explanation for paranormal things like this. Science thinks that it's possible that the sightings of a ghost ship on fire is just the moon creating an optical illusion, whether it's moonlight reflecting off a fog bank or just the moon setting below the horizon, which I guess might happen up there. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how the moon works, you guys. Other scientists believe that the ghost ship was a product of an electrical phenomenon kind of similar to St. Elmo's fire. So if you don't know what St. Elmo's fire is, basically this occurs when like a luminous plasma is created or generated by a coronal discharge from a sharp object existing in a strong electric atmospheric condition. You guys know. I mean, this is basic whatever area of science this is. We all know St. Elmo's fire, obviously. It's luminous plasma that's generated from this coronal discharge, obviously, basically, I think kind of like a solar flare, but on Earth. And that somehow is happening a lot up in Canada, and it's making these optical illusions that look like a ship that's on fire and it's freaking people out. I don't know. That's what science says, but honestly, I think that's why it's just so much easier to believe it's just a ghost ship. There's a little ghost ship just floating through the strait and just being on fire and, and doing its thing. But that's what happens there. Second story here is of the Utsuro Bune. Utsuro Bune? I don't know. On February 22nd, 1803, a group of fishermen in the Hitachi province of Japan, I believe. I didn't put that in the notes for some reason. But they saw a ship kind of just floating off in the distance, going all Peter Pan or whatever. As best they could tell, it wasn't floating in the air. It's floating on the water. I just realized how stupid that was a thing to say. Ooh, this show is so bad. Like, here's the thing. First 20 episodes of this show were bad, all right? But in a different kind of way, all right? Like, I was just kind of reading the stories, just kind of going through, making episodes. Then I got comfortable, all right? And there was a section there. I would have characters, and I would pontificate on things, and it was running real smooth. Now it's just bad. It's real bad. It's terrible. I don't know why you're listening. I don't know. And the show's growing. Like, more and more people are listening. I don't know why. I say real dumb things, and then do not edit those dumb things out. I should 100% just start this story over. Like, cut all of this and then just reappear. Like, hey, everybody, here's the next story. Like, but I'm not going to do that because, I don't want to do the extra editing work, if we're being honest. I could do it. It's not hard. I just don't want to. But also, I like the genuineness of this. It's also fun sort of disassociating from myself and imagining me talking out loud in my room by myself. Ugh. I don't know what that was. I really should edit that out. I'm not gonna. And just the strangeness of it all. So, okay, let's start over on this story. All right. On February 22nd, 1803, a group of fishermen in the Hitachi province. I wonder if that's where like Hitachi TVs are made. Hitachi probably makes more than just TVs. I just know them as a TV company. Some of you very confused right now. Sorry. But a group of fishermen in the Hitachi province of Japan saw this ship just kind of floating in the ocean off in the distance. As best they could tell, it had been deserted, and so they sailed out to retrieve it. It was by ship standards, it was pretty small. It was 10 feet tall, 17 feet wide, kind of like a small yacht, maybe. It was made of rosewood and covered in metal plates to, I guess, protect it from like the jagged rocks on a shoreline. The upper part of the boat had glass windows, and when the fishermen looked inside, they found the inner walls covered in this text of this language that they did not understand. They also saw 2 bed sheets, a bottle of water, and a few pieces of food lying around. Then they saw a young woman in the boat. She was like real tiny, real petite, like less than 5 feet tall. She had red hair, very pale skin, and she was wearing this long gown made out of this fabric that these men had never seen before. She, in turn, saw the fisherman who had just boarded her boat, and she started talking to them, but no one had any idea what she was saying. It also didn't help that she couldn't understand the fisherman either, right? Real tempted to do Japanese accent here, not going to do it, right? Although she appeared friendly, was not hostile towards these fishermen, she was holding this small, pale-colored box and did not let anyone near it, didn't let anyone touch it, just real weird behavior. The fishermen took her in the boat back to the village. No one in the village could figure out who this woman was or where she had come from. One village elder eventually sort of came up with this idea that this woman was a foreign princess who had been banished from her kingdom and sentenced to just drift alone in the ocean after she had an affair. Which, I mean, not the most unplausible thing, but I don't know how you come up with that whole story. As for the box, the same elder theorized that it held the decapitated head of the guy that she had an affair with. Because, sure. And honestly, like, that explanation was good enough for the fishermen, who then put this woman back on the boat and then pushed her back out to sea. Because they didn't want some, like, foreign whore dirtying up their village or anything. Which I think that's hilarious. Like, what if it's just this random woman who got lost? Like, she's from another country, obviously. And just this random woman who got lost, maybe had a mental breakdown or something. And then this village finds her, rescues her, tries to figure out her story because they obviously can't communicate. And then they come up with this crazy story, and then they're just like, no, we can't have you here. And then they just push her back out to sea with like probably like no food or anything. Like, she's going to die in a couple of days. I don't know. It's funny to me. Historians, though, they've taken this story and they've kind of investigated this whole encounter in an attempt to kind of figure out who this woman was. Many investigators do believe, like, they think this village elder was onto something. They believe that this woman was either a Russian or a British princess, since the windows on the boat and the metal plates on the side were somewhat indicative of Western cultures and how they would do things. Some investigators, however, don't believe this story ever actually happened. Some people, some very crazy people, believe that the Utsurobun was an alien encounter, because of course it was. Early drawings from the village and those who kind of passed down this story of this Utsurobun, they depict this ship, this boat, as being shaped like a saucer. And obviously that then has been compared to more modern interpretations of UFOs. And then obviously, guys, the mysterious symbols and the language that she spoke was obviously an Asian or an alien language. And it certainly wasn't like Russian with their weird hoingy boingy alphabet going on. Like, no, of course that's not. No, it was aliens, you guys. No, like and there's, I have no idea how this village elder would have come up with this, but I mean, the idea of this Russian woman who had an affair and then got found out about it and then was banished from the country with her lover's head in a box. What's in the box? I haven't even seen that movie. I just know that reference. But yeah, I don't know. That seems pretty plausible. Sounds like something the Russians would do, right? But anyway, that's that story. Our next story here is of the Carol A. Deering, which on August 22nd, 1920, departed from Norfolk for Rio de Janeiro with a shipment of coal. And shortly after the departure, Captain William H. Merritt got sick and had to be dropped off at a port in Delaware, which, if you're going, I know that like geography is not everybody's strong suit, but here's the thing. Norfolk is south of Delaware. So if you're trying to go to Rio de Janeiro from Norfolk and you end up in Delaware, you're going the wrong way. All right. I don't know what happened, but that's the thing. The Deering Company, who owned the Carol A. Deering, you probably put that together. They scrambled and hired retired Captain W.D. Wormel to replace him, because obviously you can't have a ship without a captain. Another man, Charles McClellan, was brought on as a first mate to help out. The crew was able to drop off their cargo in Rio without any problems and then departed on December 2nd to pick up another round of supplies in Barbados. While there, First Mate McClellan got super drunk and complained to the captain of another ship that he was having problems disciplining the Deering's crew of Scandinavian workers without Captain Wormel interfering. So like, it wasn't really the crew's fault, but like Wormel was just bad at being a captain, or he really wanted things a certain way, and McClellan, like, they were just clashing. He was even more annoyed that he had to do all of the navigating on the trip because Wormel had really poor vision. He couldn't really see what was going on. And on January 9th, 1921, McClellan was actually arrested in Barbados after someone overheard him saying he was going to kill Captain Wormel before the ship returned to Norfolk. Captain Wormel heard about the incident, but decided to forgive McClellan for what he said and bailed him out of jail, and then everybody ended up departing for Norfolk. Well, on January 28th, 1921, the Deering passed the Cape Lookout Lightship, which was one of several ships in the area that acted as supplements to the lighthouses along the coast to help ships navigate the dangerous waters off the North Carolina coast. I think now that they've kind of replaced them with like these, they look basically like oil rigs out there, but they're just lighthouses out in the middle of the ocean. So this ship, it's traveling along the Outer Banks. A thin, red-haired man with a foreign accent communicated to this lightship that the Deering had lost its anchors along the way, but he didn't really seem overly concerned about it, because I guess they probably weren't going to need them until they got to Norfolk. On January 31st, C.P. Brady at the Cape Hatteras Coast Guard Station spotted the Deering, though, after it had run aground along the shoals along the Outer Banks. But due to the rough seas, rescue boats couldn't reach the ship for another 4 days. When they were finally able to get out there, the lifeboats were missing, along with all of the ship's personal belongings and navigational equipment. They did find, though, that there was like this massive spread laid out as if like a large meal had been about to take place, but there was no one on the ship. Like, it was completely deserted. Despite a federal investigation, every suggested lead, which included a hurricane, pirates, the Russians for some reason, rum runners, and the Bermuda Triangle, like, they all turned up to they explored every possible reason why this ship would have been deserted. Mutiny is the most commonly accepted reason for the reason that the Deering got deserted. especially after investigators learned about the relationship between Wormel and McClellan, especially after the things that McClellan said back on Barbados. But the crew, the captain's log, the navigation equipment, none of that were ever discovered, and no survivors even came forward in the years following the incident. So, like, no one knows what happened to anybody on this ship. And so it's fun. It's a fun little story. Our last story here is of the Orang Medan. And in June of 1947, two American ships, the City of Baltimore and the Silver Star, were traveling through the Straits of Malacca in Indonesia when they began receiving distress signals from the nearby Dutch merchant ship, the SS Orang Medan. The message came through in Morse code. It basically said, SOS from Orang Medan. We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge, probably whole of crew dead. And then after a series of like indeterminate codes, like they couldn't really translate them, the last message to come through was just, I die. And that's pretty cryptic. That's kind of scary. The Silver Star was the first ship to arrive at the Orang Medan, and the crew floated up next to it, boarded it to try to rescue it or rescue anyone on there. But instead, the crew of the Silver Star found the deck just littered with dead bodies, most of which were lying on their backs and their faces frozen with just this horrified expression. But none of the bodies showed any signs of like outward physical injuries. So it was just really weird. The Silver Star then prepared to tow the Orang Medan back to port, but just before they got started, a fire ignited in one of the the Orang Medan's cargo holds. And without any way of putting it out, which is weird because they're literally just surrounded by water, the Silver Star sped away before watching the Orang Medan explode and then sink into the Indian Ocean. Because the ship was lost, no one could then conduct a thorough investigation as to what actually happened and to why all of these people just immediately died. A year later, a bunch of stories and rumors started circulating about this ship. An Italian missionary claimed that he met the sole survivor of this ship who had been stranded on the Marshall Islands, which were over 450 miles away. So that seems odd. The man, who is conveniently unnamed, told the missionary that the ship was illegally carrying sulfuric acid from China to Costa Rica, and that the crew had died from exposure to poisonous fumes leaking from the cargo hold. Which, like, that could make sense, but again, like, geographically speaking, all right, if you're going from China to Costa Rica, I'm pretty sure you just cross the Pacific Ocean, and you know, maybe this sulfuric acid port was on the north side of Costa Rica. I don't know. Hang on. I'm going to double check that now because I don't want to be wrong about my geography. Like, yeah, no, Costa Rica. Yeah, Costa Rica is right beside Panama. And so they've got the Atlantic Ocean on the north side, the Pacific Ocean on the south side. And like, honestly, I don't think they have a port on the north side of the country. So yeah, everything's going to be coming through on the south side. I don't even know if they have any ports on the south side. I'm looking at a map right now. It's not promising. Like, I don't really see much going on here. So how does that work? I don't know why. I don't know, man. Maybe they got a port somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, if you're going from China to Costa Rica, you just cross the Pacific Ocean. You don't need to then go down into Indonesia. You're adding extra miles to your trip. Just cross the Pacific. And then when you get to Mexico, just follow the coastline down to Costa Rica. I don't know why this is so difficult for people, says the person who has never captained a boat in his life. Maybe there's a perfectly explainable reason for that. I don't know why I said it that way. God, this show is so bad. Anyway, so yeah, this guy, this quote unquote lone survivor, told this missionary about what happened. This man then died shortly after telling that story, and the missionary eventually relayed this tale to author Silvio Scarli in Italy, who then told a Dutch newspaper because it was a Dutch ship. Several historians question whether or not the Orang Medan even ever actually existed, especially considering news stories around the event were told by a guy who was told by a guy who was told by a guy who just so happened to die right after telling the original story. So like a lot of things could have been lost in translation there. Those who do believe that it happened theorize that the crew was part of the smuggling operation to ship dangerous chemicals to various ports around the world for some reason. I don't know why. In the Orang Medan's case, seawater could have gotten into the cargo hold and reacted with the chemicals, releasing those toxic gases that then choked every member of the ship to death. In 1953, because, of course, UFO superfan Morris Jessup implied that the Orang Medan had actually been attacked by UFOs, citing no apparent natural cause of death and the horrified look that was like frozen on the faces of everyone on the ship. Even more, to add to this theory, CIA Director Alan Dulles received a letter in 1959 that hinted that the Orang Medan sinking dealt with, quote, something from the unknown, which is probably not even true anyway. If the ship did exist and it was carrying chemicals, yeah, it was probably a chemical leak and people suffocated. And that's just how that happened. Probably not an alien attack. All right, let's get out of here. So yeah, boats. I don't know how to wrap this episode up. That's the thing, is like sometimes I'm just not super interested or have a lot of contextual knowledge about boats. Like, boats are cool, bro, but like whatever, they're a thing. Like I'm not like super big boat fan, but like some of these stories were interesting, just in how it, like, ghost ships can just be a thing, or like, you know, crews can mutiny and desert a ship and then the ship just keeps going. You know, it's not like you desert a car and then the car just eventually either runs out of gas or crashes into something. Like, the boats just float until they show up somewhere. And then people are like, hey, what's going on? That's weird. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's very, especially some of those, especially when you get like paranormal stuff involved and like people start thinking aliens and stuff, like then it gets fun to think about. But other than that, let's see what we learned today. What did we learn? Number one, there might be a ghost ship in the waters of Northumberland Strait up in Canada. Probably not. It's probably just an optical illusion. Probably just people making up stuff. But maybe there's a real fiery ghost ship. Maybe. I don't know. Number two, I do really hope that some Russian princess was like exiled out of the country with her lover's head in a box. That's just such a fun story. And even more fun when she shows up to this Japanese island or whatever, and no one has any idea how to communicate with each other, and then they just decide to push her back out to sea. I don't know. It's just so funny to me. And then the last one, did aliens attack the Orang Medan and like scare people to death, and that's why their faces died in this horrified expression? Probably not. It's probably just chemicals. Next week on Our Weird World, we are headed back to serial killer land with the story of one of the most famous serial killers in American history, and that is the story of Richard Ramirez. We all know he was creepy. We all know he killed a bunch of people, but we're going to look at his full life story and how he turned into the weirdo that he was, because he's a weird dude. So that's going to be that. Thanks for listening. Sorry this show was just, I mean, like, this show's not great to begin with, but this show, like, below the low standard that I have already set. But thanks for sticking with it. And if you want, keep telling your friends about it and just lie and say it's good, I guess. But most importantly, keep it weird.